this edition of I Escape, a small-time thief becomes a cop killer.
We're just doing our jobs. And this guy wants to kill us.
And a 23-year sentence as a career criminal determined to break out from a prison within a prison.
My life was over, and therefore I've got to try and escape.
Around the world, over 9 million prisoners are behind bars. These are the stories of the few who dared to break out. Upstate New York, April 2nd, 2006. The Erie County Correctional Facility, Buffalo, New York. Local small-time thief Ralph "Bucky" Phillips is near the end of his latest sentence, 90 days for parole violation.
He was a very non-threatening, non-violent. People liked him. He was kind of like a folk hero down there. He stole cars and motorcycles, never harmed anybody.
But after 20 of his last 23 years behind bars, Bucky wants out.
The escape was interesting and bizarre to people because it occurred only 3 or 4 days before he was supposed to be released.
Even more bizarre, Bucky Phillips cuts his way out of prison with a can opener.
Like a tuna can or something. Yeah.
Using a refrigerator, Bucky boosts his way through a hole he's cut in the ceiling and gets access to the roof.
There were motion detector sensors there, but they weren't working because birds kept setting them off. And so the prison had just kind of shut them off, I believe.
An alarm finally goes off in the jail security center, but Bucky has reached the open fields around the prison and is running for the thick forest.
He's a very physically fit person, very muscular build, runs probably less than a 5-minute mile. Very much of a specimen.
Small-time thief Bucky is literally on the run through a wilderness he's known since he was a boy.
He hunted, he fished, and he spent a lot of time in the woods. That was it. It's almost like he spent his whole life preparing to run away from authorities.
Bucky Phillips believed that his parole was about to be denied, and so he was going to spend several more years in prison, when in fact he had a very short time left, and when he would have been legally released.
Bucky has no trouble avoiding capture and quickly becomes a local legend.
When he was running and getting away all the time, it became almost like, fairy tale type thing, almost like a Robin Hood.
To the locals, he's just a lovable rogue.
So it was just Bucky. They were feeding him. They knew him as a kid. He never harmed anybody. If there was such a thing as an honest thief, I guess that's what he was.
He is clever and smart and funny and is somewhat charming, but he's also like a boy in a man's body. He's a bit, immature.
Weeks go by and Bucky becomes more daring. He raids small cabins scattered throughout the forest.
He tells us one story where he came upon a grill. Someone was barbecuing in the backyard with hamburgers on it, and no one was standing around, so he took a couple of hamburgers and ran away.
But then Bucky gets a hamburger of his own, the Bucky Burger, to be eaten on the run.
He told one story where he walks out of the woods onto a road, and there's 2 state troopers there, and he didn't anticipate running into them, and he said, whoa. And he turned around, he ran back in the woods as fast as he could, and the state troopers followed him, and eventually they lost him, and they themselves became lost. And he says that he sat on top of a hill and watched as a helicopter overhead searched for the troopers to pluck them out of these woods. And Bucky had a big laugh and was smoking a cigarette and watching the whole thing.
But he won't laugh for long. The police target his girlfriend, and Bucky Phillips turns from a lovable rogue to a vicious killer on the run. New York State, June 2006. Small-time crook Ralph "Bucky" Phillips is enjoying life on the run.
When I spoke to Bucky Phillips, he said that escape and the summer he spent on the run was the most fun he's had in his whole life.
Running literally from hideout to hideout in the thick forest, this part Seneca Indian has evaded capture for over 2 months. Then on June 10th, he's pulled over by 2 state troopers in a routine traffic stop.
Bucky looked in the side view mirror and over his shoulder fires the gun as he's smiling into that mirror, looking at the troopers approaching. Smiles at the troopers, over his shoulder, fires a couple rounds, striking Sean Brown.
Trooper Sean Brown has serious gunshot wounds to his abdomen. He survives, but Bucky has turned a fatal corner.
You're looking at a very muscular, physically fit, woodsman, career criminal, institutionalized, who's now violent. Yeah, it was a recipe for disaster.
It became extremely intense. Now there were troopers everywhere, on every street corner throughout Chautauqua County, and all through the woods. There were troopers everywhere.
On August 31st, they pay special attention to this isolated farmhouse. Wiretaps reveal that Bucky has been here to visit his old girlfriend.
They had troopers watching it from various places. They had 2 troopers in particular in camouflage outfits, hiding in the woods, watching the house.
SWAT team members Don Baker and Joey Longobardo are heavily armed with automatic weapons.
While they're on this listening observation post, Bucky came across them. He fired on them, striking Don Baker in the abdomen and Joey Longobardo in the leg.
When he ambushed those 2 troopers with a high-powered rifle, and ambush is the correct word, they didn't stand a chance. Then he no longer was a comical figure. Now he was a dangerous person.
I just got home and I got the phone call. Like 2 SWATs are shot. I drove back down there. Donnie, who's a former nurse, to me, looks to be mortally wounded. He's shot in the stomach with a rifle from close range. And we put him on the ambulance and we run back to get the second stretcher. And there's Joey laying there. And he's got a wound in his leg. But he's almost completely lost color. And he has that look, that look. Vacant stare in his eyes.
3 days later, Trooper Joseph Longobardo dies after a leg amputation.
The death of that trooper changed everything. Bucky Phillips was no longer a romantic cult hero. He was a killer. He was an assassin.
One guy. One selfish, arrogant, who didn't want to go back to jail.
Ralph Bucky Phillips is on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list with a $400,000 reward on his head, and hundreds of police are on his trail.
Really, those moments that you get sick to your stomach moments when we realized that he had committed burglary at a gun store and walked away with, 20, 30 guns, some of these high-powered rifles.
And Bucky's sister has no doubt about what's going to happen next.
They're not going to ask questions. They're going to shoot him. If they get him in sight, they're going to shoot him. I know they're going to kill him.
On September 8th, Phillips is sighted by a trooper and is rapidly surrounded in a small section of woodland on the New York-Pennsylvania border.
I think we had 10 or 12 different SWAT teams from across our state, not including Pennsylvania, out there working. We probably in excess of 500 to 600 police officers.
Surrounded with nowhere to go, Bucky Phillips takes the easy way out and gives up.
When it came Ashley time, when he could have gone down shooting, he buried his gun and stood up with his hands over his head.
After 5 months on the run, this small-time thief turned cop killer is back in custody and lucky to be alive.
As much as you hate this guy and you're angry at him and he shot and killed one of your friends, we're not murderers. That's the difference between us and people like Bucky Phillips.
Bucky is convicted of 8 counts, including first-degree murder and second-degree attempted murder.
Do you know what he said? Guilty as hell. All that bravado, guilty as hell.
Ralph Bucky Phillips gets life without parole, locked in solitary confinement. Coming up, John McVicker becomes public enemy number 1. Northern England, 1968, Her Majesty's Prison, Durham. 3 guards per man dominate E-Wing, a prison within the prison used for the most violent inmates in Britain. Among them is career criminal John McVicker, 2 years into a 23-year sentence for armed robbery and escaping custody.
The special wing up there was built as a punishment block, and it was pretty brutal, and the idea was to break people.
John McVicker, 2 years for shopbreaking and robbery, 3 years in Wandsworth for riotous assembly, and 8 years for armed robbery and assault on the police.
A professional criminal since his early teens, John McVicker is in E-Wing because he's already escaped maximum security.
I had no more life to lose. I'd lost it all. So that was my motivation, and that was my kind of take on things. My life was over, and therefore I've got to try and escape.
But getting out of E-Wing is considered impossible.
I'm a professional safecracker, you know, with a breed of our own. But E-Wing, you had to get out of the prison to get out of a prison, to escape from a prison.
One of the prisoners was a guy called Wally Probin, who was serving, I think, 15 years for shooting at a policeman or something like that. And he was continually trying to escape. And he was incredibly smart.
Probyn discovers a false brick wall in the shower room, hiding a shaft leading to the roof.
He made a chisel in the workshop. They used to do wrought iron as a hobby. And he used to go in the workshop and he used his hamster cage to smuggle stuff in and out. I know it's farcical, but it's true. He had this bloody hamster.
Armed with a 5-pound dumbbell and their smuggled tools, McVicker and Probyn spend 6 weeks chipping away at the brick wall.
The only way we could cover the noise was to use the weightlifting equipment outside where we were digging. And we really had to hammer. Then we would get someone working on the weights to try and coincide with the bangs.
But they also need to cover up their work. So Probyn takes on a new hobby, paper mache.
Probyn has always had hobbies going, and they were supplying with paint. So we could paper mache between the bricks, just put them back. It looked like sort of mouldy plaster.
But as the broken brick parts are replaced by paper mache, they create a disposal problem.
There was a building works on the other side of the wing, just outside our wing, and we worked a system by which we could take the bricks that we wanted to get rid of, and we used to just throw them out the window onto the rubble.
After 2.5 months of undetected digging, McVicker and Probyn finally break through. But the shaft to the roof is too narrow.
Instead of going up, we found we could drop down into an old disused cellar.
In the cellar, a barred ventilation shaft leads to a closely guarded exercise yard. On the other side of the yard, the perimeter wall and freedom.
Once I knew that I was going to get near that wall, I knew I would make it, because I'm very fit and strong and determined.
For a month, McVicker and Probyn take turns cutting the bars with a hacksaw blade smuggled out of the prison workshop. Detection is a constant threat, but their biggest danger is another inmate, mob boss Charles Richardson.
He just had this streak in him. He just tortured people. Anyone crossed his path.
Richardson threatens to dig a fake tunnel where the guards will notice.
He's a little bit of digging out that would have created mayhem. They would have found our hole then. And so we had to bring him in, and maybe 4 of us, him and his mate.
McVicker and Probyn work through the daily threat of detection and betrayal. And even if they get through the bars, they still have to scale a massive stone wall.
We made ourselves hooks and ropes, clothing, all the stuff you'd need to get over the wall.
On the night of October 29, 1968, while Richardson and the other inmates watch a movie in the rec room, McVicker and Probyn climb down into the cellar and change out of their prison uniforms.
And we went without telling Charles Richardson. We double-crossed him.
They crawl through the shaft into the exercise yard, but Richardson and his mate are onto them.
They heard a little noise, and they looked out and saw us, and Richardson started shouting at us, you. It was like to tell the warders that we were escaping.
McVicker and Probyn cross the exercise yard and are on top of the prison wall in less than a minute.
The alarm bells were going, and there was warders shouting and screaming, torches, all that sort of thing. So it was obviously going to be a hard go.
They race along the perimeter wall, still hoping they've got enough time to escape.
Probyn and McVicker, however, continued climbing until they came out on the roof of the courthouse, which is part of Durham Jail's complex. Here, the two of them parted company.
And at one stage I looked back and he wasn't there. And I just thought, well, that's it. He's going his way, I'm going mine.
Probyn is caught almost immediately, giving McVicker the extra time he needs.
I clambered right across all the buildings that constituted the courthouse. And I think I actually went over the front gate of the prison itself with people driving in and out. And I dropped down then into some gardens. And I heard a load of warders running past. And I let them go round, and then I followed them because I was that confident. I saw a road, I went past the police station, I just walked past it.
Confident and determined, John McVicker vanishes into the night. Durham, Northern England, October 29, 1968. Armed robber John McVicker is on the run after busting out of jail.
If McVicker had been in Alcatraz in the days of Al Capone and the days when they said it was a fortress, he would have danced out of there blindfolded.
The manhunt is intensifying by the minute.
We saw a man coming around the corner. As soon as he'd gone past the corner, he broke into a great run and went past us extremely quickly, headed towards the river.
McVicker has no idea where he is and runs headlong over an embankment down to the River Weir.
I hit the bank. and suddenly I was treading on air when I thought if I'd broken something, this could kill me.
He hears police dogs getting closer.
I got down to the water's edge and swam across the river very gently, and I could now hear quite a lot of a bit of a manhunt going on, dogs and stuff. And again, I thought, well, they can't catch me.
Confidence growing, McVicker decides to stay in the river.
And suddenly, I realised I was going to really drain myself of energy, and I thought, I can't swim that down. And I got so cold, I crawled out.
Freezing and close to hypothermia, McVicker finds shelter and lays low for 3 days. But then he's on the run again, getting 12 miles past Durham before he finally runs out of steam.
I'd overreached myself physically and sort of mentally, I didn't have any reserves.
McVicker finds a phone booth in a small village and calls an underworld contact in London to pick him up.
And I came out and I saw these two guys coming to, I knew they was policemen, plain clothes. And they just said to me, I remember one was ginger haired, said to me, can we have a word, sir? So I just looked at him and took off. And I just left them for dead.
For the next 3 days, McVicker goes into hiding and waits for his underworld contact to arrive and drive him back to London.
And they said, get in the car, get in the car. And that was it. I knew I was safe. And they drove back to London.
Back on familiar turf, McVicker is on top of the world.
Yeah, it was a great, great feeling. I'd done it.
But now, he's wanted dead or alive. He's public enemy #1.
And I didn't know what was ahead of me, that I was going to eventually run out of steam. I was going to get caught or get killed.
McVicker stays in London, avoiding capture for 2 long years.
I had time to read and think, and I knew what a sort of shambles I'd made of my life, but the business of being out for 2 years changed my perspective on things, because for the first time in my life I was being, in my way, constructive. I was actually trying to build for a future.
After committing one of the most daring escapes in British prison history, public enemy #1's life on the run comes to an end when an underworld associate gives the police his address.
I got betrayed, but I was going to get caught anyway. I'd run out of options, run out of ideas.
John McVicker gets an extra 3 years for the escape and is back behind bars with a cumulative sentence of 26 years.
I went back to prison. I served not that long, really. I served 8 years. I studied all that 8 years. I gained a couple of degrees and all the rest of it.
Today, the former public enemy is a respected journalist.
I've gone into prisons and lectured people like this and say, you've turned yourself into a domestic animal and these warders are farming you. And that's your choice. If you want to change, you make your choice and you come out and you find a job and you give up crime. That's your choice.